Welcome to Astrology Talk Investigates, when I, Christina Rodenbeck, of the Oxford Astrologer, and my dear friend Sally Kirkman, discuss a specific question. And this month, we wanted to discuss something that comes up so much in astrology, and one of the things that people always ask about if they know a bit of astrology, which is, what is a Saturn return? So Sally, what's a Saturn return?
Shall I answer it in one sentence and
Just
then we can go?
Yeah,
no.
Then we go home.
Well, the returns, we talk about returns a lot in astrology. When you say on your birthday, many happy returns, that means the sun has gone all the way around the zodiac to the place it was when you were born. Many happy returns. And the returns of the planets as they move around the zodiac and come back to the place they were when you were born, they are really important chapters in your life, really important kind of trends and waves. And Saturn it's such a classic one. It's such a classic one. And why? Well, Saturn, it was the last of the traditional planets. It's the boundary planet. It's the planet that's to do with responsibility, kind of growing up and adulthood and, taking life seriously, I think. And we have these Saturn returns that come in almost every 30 years. And I think they are different, but that first Saturn return is like, oh, crikey, I better crack on with life. It's time, it's time to grow up and take life seriously. And I think that can really kick in at the end of the 20s as you move into the 30. That's kind of what it's about. What's your take?
Well, that is what it is. It's the return of Saturn to the place it was when you were born, which it happens about every 28 years. And it's really important. So you only get it 2 or 3 times in your life, if you can do the math there. And depending on how long you live, you might live a really long time and have 3 if you're lucky or unlucky. And it's really different for different people. So it depends what Saturn is like in your actual birth chart, what aspects it's making, because all of those aspects that your natal Saturn, the Saturn that you're born with, makes in your birth chart are kicked off again at the Saturn return. They're reinforced. So if you have a difficult Saturn, like I do, for example, you may have a much stronger Saturn return, where you will have endings at that Saturn return at 28. You may not know what the beginning is yet. That may not come until the next Jupiter return, which is quite a bit later. That Jupiter's on a 12-year cycle. So you have the Saturn return at 28, and then you'll have another Jupiter return when you're 36. So there's an interesting 8-year period there as well. The second Saturn return is different. It's in your 50s, and it coincides with the Jupiter return. So it has a very different feel. And that's one of the things about to always think about with astrology, is that it's complex. So it's about how the planets are working together. It's not just, you don't just have the Saturn return on its own, right? So for example, if you have Saturn in Pisces, which we do at the moment, this is where Saturn is right now. So this is people born in the mid-60s, mid-90s who are going to be having their Saturn returns. If you were born in the mid-60s, you had Saturn opposite Uranus-Pluto conjunction, right? That is not an easy placement for Saturn. So your first Saturn return may have been really tricky in the mid-90s, but you sing with those people in the mid-90s. You're in sync with each other. So that's important to look at when you're considering your Saturn return, is what is my actual natal Saturn doing?
Yeah, and on that note, I just want to, you talked about having a difficult Saturn. Saturn is my most elevated planet. It's in my 11th house. It's in Aquarius, the sign it likes to be in. And it's the ruler of my Capricorn midheaven. So, there's a side of me that I like Saturn. I like I like working hard, she says. I like I like structure, I like organization, I like the things to do with Saturn. I kind of, I have an affinity with them. And my Saturn return, very classically, is when I became an astrologer. And I sort of discovered astrology just before it. And then I thought, right, I need to get the qualifications. I need to get the accreditation. So, that's when I started studying with a company of astrologers and completed their astrology certificate. So, that shows very clearly for me that there was this sort of positive side of it. It was like, okay, I'm going to sign up to something. This is going to be, what I'm going to be doing possibly for the next 30 years. And here I am still doing it. So there's that side of Saturn too. I see that a lot, that sometimes people go, okay, yeah, I'm going to get married. I'm going to have the family. I'm going to commit to this job. So there can be some, it's like all the planets. You can focus on the positive aspect of that planet. And particularly when you've got quite, when you're more in tune with Saturn, I feel.
I think that basically, I wasn't saying that Saturn's a bad planet, but I am saying that your Saturn return can be difficult, and that's okay, right? It's okay that it's difficult. So you may have to break a lot of things at your Saturn return, and Saturn return is a good time to do it. You may need to end a lot of stuff. And having a difficult Saturn is power, because you learn to work with it, right? And actually, I have to say my Saturn return was not like that. I managed, and this is one of the things that you're talking about, is the difference between having Saturn in the 10th house. So it was all about career for you, right? My Saturn is in the 7th house. It's all about relationships, right? So I broke off my relationship that I had been in the whole of my 20s, which rendered me temporarily homeless. I got rid of my job, and this was all within the week that Saturn returned. So I was homeless, jobless, and boyfriendless.
Okay. Reset.
It was a complete reset, because I'd done that chapter of my life, and I didn't, because I was young, I didn't really know how to redo it without just like throwing everything out. And it opened up the way for me, but the way, and this is because of when I have a Saturn return, it affects all of my planets, right? It affects my entire chart because of the shape of my chart. And this is what my advice is to people, is to look how it affects the whole chart. So for me, it hits every single planet. And some of these are hard aspects. And I find it's energizing to have that kind of hard thing happen, because it sets you free, right? If you allow it to. So what I find with clients is that often you have people either decide to get married or decide to not get married. It's one or the other, right? I'm not going to do that. And that's a classic Saturn return moment, because you're 28 to 30. Am I going to stay with this person? Oh my God, no, I cannot envision having children with this person, because it's also a planet that's about parenting, becoming your own parent, or becoming a parent to small people. So taking responsibility for your life. And to take responsibility for your life may mean getting rid of stuff and understanding that you can't just drift along and say yes to things.
It is the planet of duty, care, and responsibility as well. And very often with Saturn, it can be a time when you're responsible for small children, or sometimes you're responsible for parents as well. And you need to take responsibility for yourself. I think it's a really key word. Also, I just want to sort of go back to what I was talking about, because, my Saturn return on the outer, that's what was happening. I became an astrologer. But there was a huge inner journey that went on at that time as well. I mean, I had what you could call a kind of existential crisis as well. On an inner side, I was just wondering, what on earth is it all about? Just didn't, and it was also a time when I went into therapy, and it was a time when I started my journey of personal development, also during that. So there was an outer manifestation of my Saturn return. And I think what is very typical for a lot of people is that you start to think, who am I? Where am I heading? What's it all about? And it's always I think it's always when you hit a birthday with a 0 at the end. There's always something about that. It's lordy, we're in the next decade now. So there's always something when you come to these important junctures in your life, and they very often coincide with important returns in astrology, that you start to question. And I think that's a really, really important thing to do at the Saturn returns. And I've experienced it at both of them, that it is a real time to stop, slow down. Saturn doesn't want to rush. Turn inwards, reassess, review. Are you on the right path? Are you not? What next? And like you say, what needs to end? What do I need to commit to moving forward?
I think also what I feel looking back at my own Saturn return and looking at my clients' Saturn returns, the first one is confidence. Is that actually I felt much more confident by the end of my Saturn return than I had at the beginning. And it was because I was being more authentic to my true self. And I had returned, so to speak, to my true, authentic me, and therefore, and was starting on the next phase of my life from a stronger base. And that may be because I have a Saturn-Sun conjunction. So for me, Saturn is a very important planet, but not quite in the same way as for you. It's about authenticity for me, and that authenticity is not necessarily anything to do with work. Actually, it's to do with being and relationships as well. For me, to have authentic relationships is really important. And it was also important for me to spend some time not in a relationship, not really, after the Saturn return, so that I experienced for the first time as an adult being on my own, which I hadn't been before. The second Saturn return I'm in the middle of, and it seems to me to be very, very different because of this Jupiter. The help you get from Jupiter, for a start, it's coincides, and this is an interesting cycle, okay, because it is like the Chinese cycle of 60 years, if you know about Chinese astrology or the Chinese 5 elements. This is when you have the return to, in my case, being a fire horse. We're back in the fire horse thing. The realm of the fire horse, because that's on a 60-year cycle too. And it's a very important moment that you're really having an ending of a certain phase of your life. But what I'm very interested in, and what I really notice with it, and this may be just to do with the kind of society that we're in, that we're all living such a long time now, it feels like a beginning to me.
I would agree with that. I mean, I've been through mine. I've been through my Saturn's in Aquarius, so I've done it, and I find it's been a completely different experience. And someone said to me, I don't know where I read this actually, I must have read it or someone said it, that when you get to 60 and looking at this Saturn return, and then the next 30 years, you're looking at the Indian summer of your life. You've got to this point of being 60 and you have a lot of wisdom and experience of life. And if you've lived well, you kind of know who you are, and you know what your gifts are, and you know what you can give the world. And that can be really kind of liberating and actually quite enlightening in a way. And at the same time, I think you start to shed stuff that doesn't matter. You start to let go of stuff and kind of hone things down to what's really important. And you focus on those things more. So there's this reassessment or some kind of reckoning or review that goes on. But actually, you can come out of it just feeling quite liberated and free, I think, at the end of it.
It's about confidence again, for me. Again, I feel confident. I feel authentic. And it's my advice actually with going through Saturn returns is to look for the truth, for your authenticness, wherever your Saturn is in your chart. Okay. So, for me, like I said, it's relationships is really important, authentic relationships. But for Sally, for you, clearly it was also authentic career. You were doing other stuff and then you wanted an authentic career, the real career that was, no matter what it took. Right. And for me, and it may take, Saturn wants you to take your time as well. It may take time to do whatever it is that you're going to be doing next, or to be that authentic person. And I think this one in the late 50s seems to me to be, I'm definitely having some really interesting personal encounters with people who are Saturnian. And this is another thing that can happen on your Saturn return, as you meet Saturnian type people who often are older than you, or who are very wise, or who are very decrepit as well, because Saturn is also just about age. It's the planet of aging and old clothes and old things and things that are falling apart. But it's also a planet that's about wisdom and the things that you don't need, right? So there's a lot of just dropping stuff that's not authentic anymore. And I have seen people do this and not do this at various Saturn returns. And what the Saturn return is doing is it's offering you the opportunity to be more authentic. And if you don't take it, then you're kind of stuck, right? So do it now. Do it at the Saturn return. Get rid of the stuff. Be authentic. Because you see, I've had a lot of people who kind of, at that moment in their late 20s, didn't do the Saturn thing. They got scared, because Saturn is also a planet of fear. They got scared, so they froze like rabbits and they didn't move forward. And you have to feel the fear and do it anyway with Saturn return. And if you do, you can go slow. It doesn't have to be fast.
And I think also the other really important point for me is what you picked up on, aging. It's about aging and learning. There's the one when you're coming to 30, it's like, okay, you're an adult now. There's some things that come with that, They just are. It's time to kind of look at life in a different way, from a different gaze. And particularly the one when you're moving towards 60, the body is starting to age. Interestingly, Saturn rules the bones and the joints and the teeth, and the number of people I talk to who are having some issues around these areas. But it's the reality of aging and really kind of inviting you, I think. Saturn return invites you to be honest about your aging and accept your age and accept that we will get, we're getting older. We will get older. We're getting older. And to kind of, again, be authentic around that and not disguise that, and really sort of honor the body and honor the aging process. I mean, that's the kind of plus side of that can come out. And there is fear around mortality as well.
It's the Grim Reaper. Saturn is the Grim Reaper. He is pictured with a scythe. I really agree with what you said. And that, if you were saying, this is a key thing about the Saturn return, is authentic aging, right? Being authentic about where you are in the cycle of life, right? And actually, that's incredibly empowering, to say, actually, I'm at this stage. And, when you're 28 and you're about to turn 30, you feel like, oh my God, my youth is over. Well, guess what, guys? Your youth is over. And it's fine, because you're about to get into a great period of your life. 30s are fantastic. And the same with the late 50s. It's like, guess what? That bit's over. And, people say, oh, it's, they want to say your middle age lasts till whatever. No, actually, you're not middle-aged anymore. You're getting into a new phase. And that's also fine. Just don't fake it. Saturn hates fake.
Yeah, he's saying get real, isn't it? He's saying
absolutely.
Get real, get your bus pass, enjoy it.
Yeah, don't fake it.
Yeah.
And also that you are going to die.
Yes, we are, all of us.
You're going to die. That's, forget the cryogenics. You're going to die, and that's also something that you need to think about. Interestingly, we always talk about the 27 Club, right? Which is all of these really famous people who die at the age of 27. I'm thinking Jeff Buckley, Amy Winehouse, a lot of pop stars. That's actually your lunar return, isn't it? Your progressed lunar return. It's not the Saturn return, but it does happen just before the Saturn return. And those people have finished the chapter and they don't want to do the next one. That's not for them. That's not how their life is going to work out. They completed something and they've finished it off.
So it's very important, and I think the more you kind of know about it or recognize it and work with it, embrace it, work with it. It can, it's a tricky time, but it can also be used in a way that benefits you and helps you moving forward.
Right. Well, I think that's that for the time being. If you have any questions about Saturn return, etc., let us know. See you next time.
See you. Bye.